Welcome back to the channel. I'm Chase and this is All Things Realm. Today we are looking at possibly the world's slimmest dive watch. Now, what are we talking about today? Today we are looking at the Trident from Nove Watch Company. They sent this to me. This is the mother of pearl. And honestly, I watched some reviews in the past and there's been a lot of criticism, but I can't understand what the criticism is, and we'll explain in the video. Honestly, this is one of the best dive watches. It does have its pros, it does have its cons, but when they say it is slim, it is super slim, deceptively slim. But let's just get right into it. Let's flip the camera around and dive right into the video. Okay, and this is what we're talking about today from Nove Watches. This is the Trident, like I said, the Trident Automatic G001-02. Now, this watch specifically is marketed at $670 USD. Honestly, I think that's a pretty good price for this watch. This is a Swiss-made watch. You can see right there above the 6 o'clock. It does say Swiss-made, nice and bold, because this is a Swiss-made watch. So you're looking at an automatic dive watch for under $1,000. Now, this competes with other things like Tissot or Hamilton. Hamilton, you know, they have a dive watch. However, you know, it comes in around $1,100. But if you look at, you know, companies more like Tissot, that is also Swiss made, they do make their Sea Star. You're looking at about the same price point, but normally those are going to be quartz at the same price point, about $1,000 for the automatic. So under $700 for a Swiss made automatic. And honestly, this is arguably the thinnest dive watch I've ever held in my hand. In fact, I would say this is perhaps the thinnest dive watch ever. Now, I would say this is extremely deceptive because when I show you the measurements, you'll say, well, Chase, that's almost like a normal watch. But then I'll explain why in just a minute. So let's talk about the measurements since I mentioned it. Now, the measurements of this watch is going to be 46 millimeters in diameter. So it is a rather large watch. However, the footprint of this watch, or the lug to lug, is just over 48 at 48.8 millimeters. So just because it has a large diameter, the footprint is not as large. So, you know, when it comes to things like that, a lot of times you can have a watch that's 42 millimeters in diameter, so 4 millimeters smaller, and it has a lug to lug of like 52, and it sits larger on the wrist. This is a larger profile watch, but it is a dive watch. Dive watches are meant to be slightly larger. They're meant to be easily legible, easily read under the water. So it makes sense that this would be slightly bigger. Now, the lug width on this is a little deceptive because this takes a specialty style bracelet. It's like an inverted lug. So the lug width of this is 26, but it's really not 26 because, you know, it is far smaller, takes a specialty bracelet, but the bracelet on this is actually quite nice. We'll go over that in just a minute. Now, again, the case on this is a 316L stainless steel, nice brushed finished all the way around, and it does have some PVD coating. You can see right here with the gold. Really pops. Not really much of a gold person. However, I love the way they did it on this because you can see that that gold PVD coating sort of matches the spring bars, the spring retention inside of this bezel, and you do notice that it is an open bezel. Don't worry, I know I didn't mention the thickness of this watch. I'll get to it in just a minute. Now, this watch, to make it even thinner, they chose this open bezel design, so the bezel is extremely thin on itself. Now, there's a few pros and cons to this. Now, I am a scuba diver. I love to go scuba diving. My buddy is a scuba diver. He's a dive master. He's an instructor or becoming an instructor. However, a lot of cons that I've heard about reviews of this watch is, well, what happens if you get sand in here? Well, if you're going to be diving, if you're actually going to use it as a dive watch, well, you could get grit and dirt, and then it's going to cause issues with the bezel. Well, the first thing my buddy said was, what are you, scraping along the bottom of the ocean? And then I was like, yeah, you're right. So anybody who's in the dive community knows that your dive computer, which is not a dive watch, but a dive computer that sits on your wrist, is the absolute cleanest thing that you have on your kit. Now, that's the thing you take care of the most. And honestly, it is not something you get really dirty. And you know, a lot of times when it comes to washing your gear. You know, people could say, well, underneath the bezel here, you know, you could get grit, you could get salt intrusion that builds up. Well, anybody who actually goes scuba diving or goes in the ocean knows that one of the things you do immediately following a dive is to do a freshwater clean of all your gear. Now you saw just right there, sort of had an issue gripping this. Now I wish they would have used something more like a coin edged bezel just because it gives you a little more grip. But it is, to be honest, it is a little harder to grip it in these gloves. But one of the things I noticed is, you know, gripping this, because it is sort of this, it's not scalped, but you know, you have these recessed and excessed spots on the bezel. It does make it a little harder to grip also because it's so thin. However, it's just good enough with a rubber glove where it's not an issue. Like if you were actually using this as a scuba diving watch, this does have 200 meters of water resistance, so you can go pretty far down. If you wear like a outer glove, like a glove with rubber grip, it grips just fine, spins just fine. Under the water, I haven't really had it much under the water. However, I don't really see it as too much of an issue. I just love those exposed like spring retention just because it's completely different. It's really rugged. It gives it like a steampunk-esque look. Now this does have a mother of pearl dial. They say this is a Tahitian mother of pearl dial. It is top of the line, top tier when it comes to its highest quality. Honestly, I'm not a big mother of pearl fan, but I love how they did this. Now, when it comes to mother of pearl, no two dials will ever be the same. They will always be different. In fact, you can see some imperfections already on the dial because it is natural right there, just underneath the 1 o'clock applied indices. It does have applied indices. The lume on this is really well. All the writing is extremely immaculate, and you do have that date at the 3 o'clock with a nice little gold trim, matches the hands. Looks really, really good. In fact, again, I'm not a big gold person. However, I think the mixture of both just really makes this a very versatile watch. And I say that because when it comes to stylized things, and I love to wear rings and stuff like that, it's very difficult for me to wear a brass or a gold ring because all my watches are stainless steel. However, this allows me to wear basically anything as an accessory if you're into that kind of thing. Just worth mentioning. Now in this watch is the Swiss movement. It is a Ronda R150 automatic movement. Now it does beat at 28,800 beats an hour. And honestly, I just love the way it looks. It's not extremely decorated, but it's decorated enough that you can sit back and just enjoy that Swiss automatic movement. It does have 40 hours of power reserve like most basic automatic movements, and this is just a basic day automatic. Does have hacking, does have hand winding. It is sapphire crystal all the way around. It has a double dome sapphire crystal on the top and on the bottom, giving it a very, very unique UFO or sort of submarine capsule design. Now let's talk about the measurements since we're here of the thickness of this watch. Now, most dive watches are around 13 to 14 millimeters thick. This is 13 millimeters thick at the highest and lowest point. So at this thickest point right here on the top of the two domed sapphire crystals, it is 13 millimeters. So is it really that thin? Well, not necessarily on the highest points, but on the lowest points here around the case, and you can see that around the case it is extremely thin. It's just at 6.3 millimeters. Now, what does that mean? Now, our wrists have a natural concave at the wrist bone. Let me show you. Now, we have a natural concave right here on our wrist bone, and most people would say that if you wear a watch, it shouldn't be loose, it shouldn't be high and tight, it should be right here along your wrist bone. Well, when you actually put the watch on, and one of the things that isn't a big con for me, I'm not a big fan of the butterfly clasp, but they did it extremely well. I'm pretty happy here. The bracelet is very nicely finished. Love that. Hadn't mentioned it yet in the video. However, love the bracelet. Again, not a whole lot of micro adjustments, but We'll talk about that when we talk about how this fits. So basically, when this sits on your wrist right here, you can see that it does have, a larger footprint at that 46 millimeter. However, the lug to lug still being just at 48 doesn't overly fit on the wrist. It's not huge on the wrist, but you can definitely tell it is a statement piece. But when I turn my wrist to the side, you can see that it actually sits relatively thin on my skin. That's because we have that natural curvature in our wrist bone. So because of that dome sapphire on the bottom just sits perfectly within that crease of our wrist, and it really sits extremely thin on the wrist. So you're talking about 6.3 millimeters from the actual skin of the wrist, or the skin of your body and your wrist, up to that bezel, and then you're talking about just a couple millimeters higher other than that. But when it comes to most sleeves and stuff like that, this is going to slide so easily underneath it. It's almost ridiculous. So is this really a very thin watch? Absolutely it is. Now the measurements would be very deceptive on the fact that it doesn't seem very thin at 13 millimeters, but the way it fits on the wrist, it really is a really thin, really lovely fitting watch. So all in all, what are my impressions of this watch? Well, I'm extremely happy with the design of this watch. I'm extremely happy with the finishing of this watch. A pro that I would say is the very thin design makes it so wearable. Now, I meant to mention that this having a non-real adjustable or micro-adjustable bracelet tends to slide around, but when you get a good fit, this curved sapphire tends to stick on the skin quite well because it goes into that recession, and then it just stays planted on the wrist and it doesn't really move around. Now this is mostly probably meant to be worn in more moist climates, in hotter climates, places where you are going to be near the ocean, which means that your skin is naturally going to be slightly sticky. And as gross as that may sound, this sapphire just adheres to that and it just stays. Now it's not tight, it's not loose, it just stays in place, which to me probably is unintended, but it works pretty well anyway. Now again, one of the cons is the fact that it does use a customized bracelet. I almost wish they didn't do this, did a standard lug, so I could replace the strap with, any type of silicone strap or any type of rubber strap or something similar, simply just to give it, a little more wearability. A lot of people do not like, I'll give you an example. I have 3 friends that I know who are in the watch community who do not like stainless steel bracelets. They do not. No matter what, if they get a watch with a stainless steel bracelet, a Rolex or a Tag Heuer, they will replace it with a Zulu strap, a NATO strap, a rubber strap, a leather strap, anything except a stainless steel. They immediately take it off. So it's kind of cutting the market down by not allowing a standard lug width. However, it's their own design and it just works with the rugged nature of this watch. Really love what they've done. Really happy with the overall look of this watch. Again, I'm not a big mother of pearl fan, but I think the way they did all the gold and the stainless steel and the mother of pearl, I think is exactly in that sweet spot. If it's not your thing, this kind of makes it your thing. Now, what do you guys think about the watch? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Again, I'm still working on the background here. Hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks, my entire studio will be finished. Until then, just deal with it. I'm dealing with it. You can deal with it too. Now, I have a lot of reviews coming up in the future. This review came out a few days after the last review. I have another watch review coming out in about 2 days. After that, I have a GPS review coming out, then a Omega review coming out, then a Pagani design review, then a comparison. I have so many reviews coming out in the future. So make sure you guys are doing one of 3 things, if not all 3 things. Hit that subscribe button down below. Leave a comment of the content you guys would like to see on this channel. It really does feed the algorithm. Like it, hate it, don't really care. Leave a comment down below. Blast me, love me, don't really care. But make sure you guys are doing the last thing as well, which is hitting that notification bell so you guys can be notified when I drop that next video. Until next time.